There are surprisingly few things to be doing in your wildlife garden in August, but the things you can and should be doing are incredibly important. Take watering, for example. I think most people think that it's just a case of chucking some water over your plants and then walking off, but actually it can be a little bit more complicated than that. I'm going to talk you through the ins and outs of watering to help you both conserve water and help your plants and wildlife thrive in your gardens, as well as a bunch of other tips for you to be doing in August. A lot of our garden wildlife really needs a helping hand when it comes to drinking water in the warm summer months. And hands down, the best way to keep your wildlife watered is to have a pond or even a mini pond. Both of these contain enough of an ecosystem to help keep things like populations of mosquitoes at a manageable level. They also don't build up disease in quite the same way as something like a bird bath or a source of water for a hedgehog might. But if you are putting out a bird bath or hedgehog saucer, then do make sure that you're changing that water every single day and really giving it a good clean. And of course, last but very much not least, we need to remember the little guys. That's our bees and flies and hoverflies and butterflies and moths. And those guys are really easy to keep watered because you can make yourself a bee drinker. And that is just a shallow tray of water like this with something for all those tinier things to land on so that you don't end up drowning. Here I've used some shells, but you could use marbles or just straight up pebbles. Be as artistic as you want, but ideally have multiple ones of these across your garden. When it comes to watering your plants, there are three things to consider. That's when, how to water, and also what to water. As for when, the best time, hands down, is the morning. And that is because the soil is at its coolest and therefore your water won't just evaporate up into the air again. If you really can't do morning watering, the next best time is the evening. But whatever you do, don't be watering in the middle of the hot day. So how do we water? Well, I think a lot of people tend to make the mistake of thinking you need to water really, really often and little bits of water. But actually the best way to ensure your plants have really nice deep roots, which is what we want for them to be resilient, is to water a lot but infrequently. All that water draining down to the roots encourages the roots to basically grow down looking for the water. If you do the opposite, then you just end up with lots of superficial surface roots. And of course, when we have really dry conditions, that means your plant isn't really ready to cope. Another thing to really do is to watch where your water's going. So is it draining into the soil, or if you've got silty soil in particular, it can often run off the surface as well, particularly if it's been dry. Let me show you what I mean. As you can see, on this soil, which was really dry, a lot of the water is just pouring off the surface and not really going anywhere near the plant roots. It's actually going on the footpath. A better thing to do would be to water a little bit into a spot, let that soak in, and then go again. And just keep doing that until you've given that plant a good dose of water. Alternatively, another top tip I've got is to take a plastic water bottle, take the lid off it, cut the bottom off, and then half bury that plastic bottle into the soil. And then you simply water into that funnel effectively, and then you can watch that water go down. And that really does get straight to the roots of your plant. Finally, there's the what to water. Now, increasingly, each summer, we tend to find ourselves in quite often a bit of a drought situation. So we all have a responsibility as garden owners to not waste water and to be as selective about what we put water on. If you've got pots, then there's a very strong chance that you will need to water these guys daily. You can minimise how much water you need to put on them by simply putting them in a pot saucer. That catches the excess water and also gives your invertebrates something else to drink from. And also, if we are in a heatwave situation, then I very much recommend moving your pots temporarily into a shadier spot just to reduce the amount of water lost from them. Another thing to focus on is any new planting in your garden. That's things that have probably gone in the last 12 months or so. And this just ensures that they have the best start in life. So if you're doing a good dose of water infrequently, getting those roots down there, then they can be more resilient for the following years. In particular, this goes for our woody plants. That's our trees and our shrubs. Now these guys actually need to be watered over the first maybe 4 summers of their life, and that can be really hard to remember. So I always recommend popping a little reminder into your phone. Another thing to prioritise are plants that are in flower but looking just a little bit wilted, like this fool's parsley and nicotiana behind me. Now, as wildlife gardeners, of course, we're always looking to have as much in flower as possible. So by keeping those plants watered, you're making sure that your invertebrates do have a source of pollen and nectar. As for everything else, if it's been exceptionally warm and dry, then I'm afraid to say that a lot of your plants might just look a little bit sad. And you have to kind of accept that to a certain extent, and also just realise that everyone is in the same boat. However, there are a few things that you can consider. First of all, keep the foliage, even if it's looking very wilty, above the ground, and don't chop them down, because they're providing a lot of shade and protection to both the soil life, and also your other plants. If you really can't stand the look of lots of wilty plants in your garden, then I recommend just getting a pair of secateurs and simply chopping and dropping in situ. And that just involves doing this. All that foliage and plant vegetation matter will be still protecting the soil. With those plants, if they're likely to come back year after year, i.e. they're perennial, then do make sure you water the roots every now and again just to keep the roots alive. And if you can, mulch with some compost after you've done that, just to stop the water from evaporating away. And finally, if you've got a plant that every single year is really hard to keep alive and thriving, then I very much recommend to cut your losses, I'm afraid, and take it out. Maybe you can try it in a different location in your garden, or give it away to a friend who could look after it. And whatever you do, look for something that is going to thrive in the conditions that you have in that spot. And my top 3 tips for future water resilience are: number 1, can you get your plants in the ground rather than in pots? Not everyone can do this, particularly if you're renting, but if you can lift a couple of slabs here and there, your plants will be much, much easier to keep alive. Number 2 is to plant in the autumn. If you put in new plants in the autumn, then the soil is still warm, hopefully the rain's returned, and that means that the soil is in really good condition to encourage root growth, which is obviously what we need our plants to be doing. By the time the spring and the summer then arrives, you should have a much stronger plant that will need much less care. And thirdly, if you're planting trees or woody shrubs, don't be tempted to put in big plants. All that top growth takes a hell of a lot of effort down below where the roots are to keep alive. If you plant small and then allow it to grow into the space, you will have a much more resilient plant. Our gardens have a big potential to provide a lot of food for a lot of different creatures. We've talked a bit about the pollen and nectar provision and keeping particular plants watered to make sure our invertebrates are happy. But as we go through mid and late summer, then a lot of seeds and fruits will also be forming. Now, to help them form, don't be tempted to cut back the foliage. Let those seed heads form. They're going to be providing really important seed for our garden birds. And this is even more pertinent now that we're not supposed to be putting out supplementary seed through May to October. Another thing that you can relax is deadheading. If you deadhead a plant, and that just means that once a flower has gone over, you take that flower stem off, you do encourage a few more flowers, but you're also removing the seed heads of that plant. This is particularly true for roses. One thing to try might be to only deadhead half of your roses and let the other half form hips earlier in the year. That will feed lots of mammals and also your birds. There really are seeds everywhere when you start looking. There's this purple toadflax and all these oxeye daisies that are absolutely smothered in seed. And then of course, some seed heads are really beautiful as well, like this honesty. Now, birds will definitely take the seed of this, but over the coming months, those papery seed pods are going to turn a really lovely silver colour, which will look wonderful in autumn and winter. Like we said earlier, in August there is less to do in the wildlife garden, and the same applies for your lawn. If we've had really high temperatures and in combination with less rainfall, your lawn really has probably stopped growing, so you don't need to mow it as much. Also, if you have slightly longer grass, it is very likely to stay greener for longer. So here I've got a no-mow patch and you can see that it is the only green part of the lawn. So that's an indication that less mowing is probably better for your lawn. And finally, if you do have some very, very straw-coloured patches of grass, don't panic. Definitely don't waste water on it. Grass is tough and there is probably lots of life at the roots at this stage. And even if there isn't and you end up having a slightly patchy lawn in autumn, it's really, really easy just to chuck some more seed down and let that grow. As you're cutting certain things back, do always look for opportunities for materials that are really good for habitat building. As we go into the autumn and winter, we're going to be looking at building a lot more habitat for creatures, and it's so good if you can use what is growing in your garden. For example, allium stems, they're semi-hollow, they could be a really nice overwintering hidey hole for some creature. And also, I've just pruned this rambling rose because it is the right time of year to do that. And these stems are really good for both nesting bees and also lots of things like parasitic wasps. So make sure you keep them because they will come in really handy later in the year. And while you're spending all that time watering your garden and wandering around it and enjoying the summer, do make sure you're making observations of things like which plants you might need to be taking out, which plants are doing really well and what you might want to plant come autumn. Why don't you look up some really, really good drought-resistant native plants, and also make sure that you've got a range of flower shapes in your garden at any one time. That just ensures that different pollinators can get into the flowers. And finally, we are going to be coming into bulb planting season very soon. That's from September through to November. So have a look at the catalogues, see what kind of things you want for the following spring and get ordering.
That's it for this month's Wildlife Gardening Guide. We're creating a guide for every month of the year, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and sign up to our newsletter so you don't miss it.